We're going over exposure index, and I'll continue in a second one with the exposure errors that you might see terminology-wise. EI versus EIT. EI is exposure index or exposure indicator. It's considered the key to controlling digital X-ray exposure levels. The EI can serve as an indicator of how much exposure was used for a particular exam. It could be part of a quality control management program. It could be a useful tool for monitoring exposure values. Sometimes during a quality control review, we can find exams that techs maybe need more training on if we are consistently overexposing a certain exam. So that's just an example there. EIT is the exposure index target. It's essentially the target that they want you to hit. It's the number that they think would be ideal for that exam. It's also used to calculate the deviation index. And the deviation is how far off you were with your technique, essentially. The exposure indicator is usually a number. It's a numeric representation of the receptor exposure, so how much receptor exposure was received. Each brand, of course, has a different term or different value. For us, we use the Fujifilm, and that's your S value. We use Canon cassettes on the portable machine, and at Main Street, and they actually have a Rex value. Siemens is the EXI, and then GE is the DEI, and I believe we have that on miscellaneous. It'll tell you if you're under or overexposed. Fuji system, just a reminder, the ideal is 200. And just remember, it's reverse of what you think. So a low S number is actually overexposed, and a high S number is underexposed. So on the image here, the S number of 75 is actually overexposed. The S number of 350 is actually underexposed. Just remember, your CR, your Fuji S number, is opposite of all your digital ones. The DEI is your deviation. So how far off were you compared to the target? And each equipment will have a different sort of value range, but it's really similar in sort of concepts. You're either over or under. It usually gives you a number or a percentage. And what I found was interesting in reviewing all of these is think about how many times in miscellaneous or at, say, Main Street where you were over by 1 or 2. And if you come over to the chart here, if you're over by 1, you use 26% too high. Over by 2 is 58% too high. And over by 3 is actually 100% too high compared to what you should have used. So that for me was a little bit surprising, and it gave me a better idea of how to adjust my technique and what I should have used and how to bring it down. And I have a video on this, which I hope you guys will watch. I think it's from X-Ray Bob, and he explains how to figure out the deviation index and what you should have used. Over on the left here is the big deviation chart. I'm sure you guys have seen this at Main Street, and I think Noble has the same one, but it's great. You find the mass that you used, and then your DI, your deviation. So if you're at a +3 and you use 20, you should use 10. It's a great guide for us as technologists to kind of understand what we should have used and help you with learning your technical factors. Just a little reminder about sensitivity numbers, that it's not just about technique. There's a lot of other factors that might be considered for the S number or why you're getting the S number that you're getting. Just remember, if you're not centered to that CR cassette, your S number is not going to be accurate. If you're not at the correct SID, your number is not going to be accurate to do collimate. That'll come into play. If your collimation is wide open, you have a lot of scatter hitting your plate, it's going to read that as well. So it's not just technique, but technique is sort of the primary. So, and dose creep or technique creep is a term we're starting to see pop up with digital imaging. It's something that's sort of starting to come up because technologists are using more technique than they need to, simply just to get a better image quality or what they think is better image quality. I think this also comes down to a communication breakdown between technologists and their radiologists. if they think they need to continually overexpose to get the image that the radiologist wants, they're going to continue to do so. So communication with the radiologist is key on what their expectations are or what their requirements are, and testing of the equipment. Overexposing is not an immediate harm, but if a technologist is overexposing for a long term, consequences, eventually will come up with the overexposures. So it's something that you'll start to see terminology wise, but that's what dose creep or technique creep means.